Greetings, everyone. We've been following a historical timeline of the Chan masters. We started from the Yuan dynasty. We went all the way to 1500 in Ming dynasty. And today we are focusing on Master Xu Yun from the Qing dynasty. And the era of his time was actually from 19th century. And his life journey is actually a great inspiration for all of us learning Chan. And his contribution for the Chan school is paramount. In terms of the Huatou method, Shifu also focused a lot on Master Xu Yun's teaching. I believe in 1998, Shifu used a lot of materials from Master Xu Yun's teaching. And Shifu Shengyan Master also highlights and also has written several teachings and works based on Master Xu Yun's teaching. I believe the last retreat, 49 days, that Shifu led in 2007, I believe that was seven sessions of 7-day retreat, and I was there as well. That was the most memorable, most moving retreat I've ever had, not only because Master Xu Yun's teaching, but Shifu uses the life journey and journey. Shifu also uses his own life experience to teach us. I was very much moved and touched by Shifu's teaching. And that is actually a great reminder for us that's of our commitment. So therefore, if we talk about the Chan practice, we have to talk about Master Xu Yun. So each Chan master that I have introduced in my lecture, they all have his style. And we use Guang stories to demonstrate how to use Huatou method. And we actually saw the Gaofeng Chan master. He uses experience in the mountains as a way to teach us. He has also given many examples of different Huatou style and why Huatous are important and used. And later in a Hansa master, he is the first one using reciting Buddha's names to investigate Guang. And I believe back before the 5 dynasties period, the practice of combining Pure Land and Chan practice had become popular, and therefore reciting Buddha's name or chanting Buddha's name become a very popular method of practice. So if we go back in history, that will actually start in about Yuan dynasty. So whether you're chanting mantra, upholding mantra, we also contemplate, investigate who is doing all this recitation. In Xu Yun Master's teaching, the way he approached Huatou and the Tao sensation, he actually explained it the best. And today we're going to look into that. Master Xu Yun, he was actually the abbot of Nanhua Temple. He would actually visit each shrine to offer incense offering. When he arrived at the mummified statue before, in front of the Hansan master, he actually delivered a poem that written by him. 德清 today, 德清 in ancient days, then and now in different shapes, the rise and fall of Buddha Dharma in tune with the seasons, going into the forest and meadows without end. This is actually a very short poem in Chinese. Master Han San was also known as De Qing. Master Xun was also known as De Qing as their ally names. From this perspective, the poem actually connects a master today and a master before. If we look at their teaching of Chan, we can actually see a continuity of styles. We will need to review some of turning points of Master Xu Yun. He has written a poem to describe his life story, living through 5 emperors and 4 historical periods in Chinese history, not aware of the challenges of life. After all kinds of hardship and turmoil, I came to know the nature of impermanence of all things. And actually, Master Xu Yun's life was full of hardship. In the previous poem he shared, he also has gone through all these historical changes, and also how Buddha Dharma declined and came back again. So it shows that his journey of life is always on the path of delivering Dharma. And this is absolutely a great example for all of us learning Buddhism, learning Buddha Dharma for us. So, so in terms of his life journey, there are some highlights in his life, and there are some low points in his life, and all these events all these events like intertwine into his whole life. So when he was born, the very first encounter of hardship was actually at the time he was born. It was a very hard childbirth for his mother. He also had 4 times of enlightenment experience. He passed away at the age of 120 years old. And we will be looking at some of the highlights of his life. So let's look at what happened when he was born. So he was born to much older parents. His parents was about more than 40 years old when they had him. So his mother was actually visit a temple of Guang, and his mom had a very special dream. But the temple that she visited was actually was out of shape. And this was just to show a connection of his mom, the connection his mom with the Guang temple. So there was an unusual poem his parents had. A Guanyin Bodhisattva. A Guanyin Bodhisattva came on the back of a tiger. And then the horse with the Guanyin sitting on top of the horse, jump onto the to the bed in the dream, and that is how his mom became pregnant after that. At the time of the master's birth, his mother went through a lot of difficulties, so he came out with a collapsed womb. So, or a flashback in the Chinese description. And that was a very scary scene. And actually his mother died soon after his birth. And actually the next day, an old merchant came and actually, so in the story, an old merchant came to help, and later he grew up with his stepmother. And and the reason we mentioned about his birth story is actually it was set the background of the story of Master Xun, who later went on pilgrimage to pay respect to his mother. And then let's look at when he was 17 years old, when because his dad was working outside most of the time. So when he was 19 years old, he decided he was ready to leave home. And so he actually went all the way to the Yongquan Temple, and he became a disciple of a Chang Kai master. When he was 20 years old, he actually took refuge with Miaolian monk, and he received his full ordination, and his Dharma name was Gu Yan, and was also known as Yan Che. And actually, there were some dramas and television dramas and movies based on Master Xun Yun's life stories. If you're interested, you can actually look into that. When he was 31 years old, and he actually got an opportunity to study with Master Rongjing.
He left home. He fled home, so he was afraid that his father will look for him and took him home again. So he was in hide. When he saw Master Rongjing, he was in pretty shabby shape, and the Fashi asked him to shave his hair and take a bath, then send him to do some work, and ask him to use who is dragging this corpse around as his Huatou. And he has 4 enlightenment experiences. The first time is in Gaoming Monastery in the Chan retreat. And that was after he fell into the water. He arrived in Gaoming Temple. His health condition was not good, and he encountered many obstacles, but he still practiced really diligently. Many people have heard of the story of his first enlightenment. And in the Chan Hall, in between each sitting, they will serve tea. And one time when the tea was served, the tea spilled over and burned his hand. And he got enlightened, and he made a verse which reads, "A cup fell to the ground with a sound clearly heard. the space was pulverized. The mad mind came to a stop. When the hand released its hold, the cup fell and was shattered. And so his doubt mass was totally shattered as well. So at the time, all the deluded thoughts, all the thoughts came to a stop. And he also has another verse. When the hand released its hold, the cup fell and was shattered. It's hard to talk when a family breaks up or someone dies. Spring comes with fragrant flowers blossoming everywhere. Mountains, rivers, and the great earth are but the Tathagata. Okay. I talked about he went on pilgrimage to return to pay gratitude to his parents. And he has a verse for that. It says, let go some of the habits. You can get some brightness. So we can see our habitual tendencies in our daily activities. When people were told that they were too loud and kind of rude when they replied, they said, no, I was not. So the habits and the brightness are offsetting each other. And affliction and wisdom, affliction and brightness, they're all they're in a trade-off relationship. And also the second enlightenment was at age 62. The first enlightenment was at age of 56. The second one is at age 62. It was in Zhongnan Mountain, a very cold place. He was living in a thatched hut. One day, he cooked a taro. When he was waiting for the taro to be cooked, he sat in meditation and went into samadhi. And it was the end of the year. After the new year, his neighbor thought about him, and because they haven't seen him for a while, they went to check on him and saw that he was in meditation. So they used the handbell to wake him up. And after he got out of meditation, they asked him, have you eaten? He said, no, my taro should be done by now. So they opened the lid. They found out that the taro is covered by higher than 1 inch of mold. And it was frozen like a rock. So the neighbor said, you must have been in samadhi for half a year, more than half a month. So both of them sat down to cook a new taro and have a meal together. And this is the teaching by Master Lin Yuan. He asked Master Xu Yun, he called Master Xu Yun Grandmaster, He said, I heard that Grandmaster had the enlightenment experience in Zhongnan Mountain. So was it intentional or was it unintentional? And the answer by the Grandmaster is, if a person have intention to enter into samadhi, it will not be achieved. If it's unintentional, then it will be like a statue made of rock or wood. You'll have to set your mind in one spot, and then there's nothing that cannot be achieved. Later, Master Lingyuan asked, I would like to learn from Grandmaster. Please teach me. And Master Xu Yun said, you'll have to use Huatou. And Master Lingyuan didn't know what Huatou was at the time. So what Xu Yun Master taught Lingyuan Master is as such. Hua is deluded thought. It's like you're talking to yourself when before the deluded thought arise. What is your fundamental phase? Before the word is spoken, before it arises, I contemplate. And this is the same as how you use reciting the Buddha's name to investigate the Huatou. You investigate what is the original phase. So if the thought has already arisen, then you have to use your right thought to arouse the right thought. If I find out that I lost my right thought, if I can focus on before the word arises or the thought arises, that is the focus, to try to investigate what is the original phase. You really want to know what is the original phase. So if you don't have if you have that kind of diligence practice, then any deluded thoughts or scattered thoughts will not continue to exist. So the right thought is the eagerness to know the answer. We talked about that practicing Huatou, we need to have faith and confidence. And these are all geared toward this practice. With those, then the practice will be effective. So when I was using the Huatou method, first we have to check if we have these basic essentials. If I don't have enough confidence, I don't have a clear goal, and I don't have enough determination, all these have to be checked when you are practicing Huatou. it says that when you practice, you have to practice vigorously. It's like your parents have died. When the parents dies, usually we will be inspired to practice even harder. And that will be a very powerful enforcement. I'm going to tell you a story. When I was still in Nongchan Temple before it was reconstructed, I attended a Chan retreat there. And I feel like I wasn't using the method effectively. One day, it's during the Chan retreat. One night, after shower, I went into my office. I want to see what Sifu's teaching was. And something really unusual happened. When I was looking for the book, right after I entered into my office, suddenly someone came into the room because she saw the light. She's one of the retreatants. She just received a phone call from her family that telling her that her sister was stabbed many times and is in a critical condition. And even if she was in the retreat, upon hearing this news, she didn't know what to do. So when she saw me, she was crying. After she told me what happened, suddenly that birth and death matter suddenly became real to me. So with that instance, when I sat down to meditate, I felt like I could practice more effectively. Even though my motive wasn't correct, but the encounter helped me. So the key is you need to wanting to know the answer so that you can practice vigorously, diligently. Here is one verse that Xu Master would use in every retreat. It's like if you're guarding an emperor palace, you have to guard the top of the palace. And this is and here is a quote from Master Huangbo Xiyun. Let's read it. It means to get rid of the worldly the worldly matters is very difficult. So we'll have to use the method very diligently and continuously. If you haven't gone through a very bitterly cold winter, how can you expect to smell the fragrance of the plum blossoms? So without very strict test, it's just like the plum blossom has to go through the test of the cold winter before it can start its blossoming.
So the poem that I just described must be, I'm sure a lot of you will find it familiar because we have to go through challenges in order to taste the fruit of success. And therefore, the attitude of upholding precept is same as going through the process. And therefore, we should also use the same we should have the same mentality in our practice of using Huatou. If, let's say, if you're able to apply the methods continuously, but if you don't have any vexation, you also don't have any Huatou neither. You don't want to become a rock sitting in the river where you don't feel anything. In Master Xu Yun's explanation is that and in Master Xu Yun's the teachings that we shall not let go of all those feelings or try to achieve the state where there's no vexations at all. Chan practice actually requires determination. So the verses you see here is actually to explain the perspective we should have. It's just like you are in a battlefield. You are one man against a mass troop of enemies where you have no return. I recall a trip that I went to Kenya with Master, with actually Venerable, with another Venerable. We were in a wild animal park, a zoo. We were riding in a truck, and we saw a mass group of buffaloes. We hold our breath because that was very impressive. We whispers, we whispers, and we asked the locals what we could do. What could we do? The only thing we could do was to turn around and probably and find our way out in front of a like big mass group of buffaloes. But actually in our practice, there's no way back, there's no way out. It is the same idea when you recite the Buddha's name, when you do chanting, when you are upholding, you're chanting the mantra. It's the dedication that we put into. So this is an example. This is an example we are seeing here. Next is an example when he was 63 years old. He was, Master Xu Yun was visiting Thailand, where he was actually had a Dharma talk. At the time, he entered into Samadhi during his Dharma talk. and he entered into samadhi for 9 continuous days. That became a big news in Thailand, which is a Buddhist country, and therefore the king, kings and the people in the palace, and a lot of disciples, people actually came to pay respect. And actually, after a master came out of the samadhi state, he actually experienced his legs became paralyzed. So his body was in a great pain. He was not able to talk. He could not see anything. All the physicians had no further resources to help him. But actually for the master, he said that he actually felt indifferent to this. He was not actually bothered by any of the physical suffering. At the time, he actually, there was one thing that he could not let go of. That was actually a bank draft that he actually sewed to his clothes. And nobody knew that he carried a bank draft with him. And he was concerned that what if people thought that he passed away and maybe burned down, increment his body, and this bank draft would have been gone. This bank draft was actually a donation to be used later to support the Dharma teaching. So he was actually very much concerned that what if people did not know about that I had a bank draft with me on my in my clothes. So he actually cried, and that he prayed for Mahakasya's Payat for protection. And then at the time, Master Miaoyuan, who came to visit him and saw that Master Xun was crying with tears down. So Master Miaoyuan came close to Master Xun and listened to him. And then he was actually praying Mahakasapaya for protection. And then Master Xu asked for a cup of tea. So after drinking the tea, his mind became clear and he fell asleep. While dreaming, he saw an old man who looked like Mahakasyapa sitting at the bedside. He said, "BQ, you should never stray from the you should never take off your robe and be away. Just make sure you keep your bowl and robe and stay close to them." And soon he came out of his dream, and then he realized he was in his dream. He was still in his dream, he was holding onto his robe and bowl. And soon after, he woke up, but he felt relieved, speechlessly. So later, he was able to talk, and he actually asked Master Miaoyuan at the time to get some medicine for him. And later that he went through, it took him more than 20 days to fully recover his suffering state, like physical condition. The state of his samadhi was actually very subtle and deep, and actually took a lot of times to be completely out of his samadhi state. So the story we just mentioned we just share here, is actually example to show us that Master Xu Yun was actually very much concerned about how Dharma can be passed down, can be delivered, could be shared with others. And here's the fourth example of Master Xu Yun's enlightenment. That was when he was 112 years old in 1951. And I need to mention quickly about how he went through that. That was when he was actually ever since, like, between age 68 and up to 111 years old. That was a long period of time he dedicated his life into preaching Dharma. So in 1951, he was about 111, 112 years old. So at the time, he was at Yunnan Temple. There were villains who came into town. He was actually, Master was locked up. He could not go out of his room at all. And it was basically, it's just like being locked down in a dungeon. 3 days after, 10 villains, big guys, and force him to give up all those gold jewelries and possessions. So he was being beaten with wooden stick and later with metal stick. Just picture that for a senior at the age of 112. Just picture that the physical torture that he had to go through. He was weak, he was bleeding, he had several fractures, and he had fractures in his chest bones, and he was beaten to the state that he almost died. He was forced to offer his possession, and he was asked to provide golds and silver. Master Xu Yun actually went into samadhi when he was going through all this physical torture. In deep at night, his attendant came back and put him back on his bed. A day after, the villains learned that the old monk did not die. They came back to torture him again. This is a very unbelievable story. So the villains saw the monk sitting there in samadhi. So they dragged him down to the floor. They beat him up with a wooden stick. And it was like a stampede. They used their shoes to step on him. He was bleeding everywhere on his face. They thought this time this monk would die, so they left. So the attendant put the monk back to his bed, and it took 5 days before Master Xu Yun could actually lie down on his side. It was a day and night after nothing happened. His attendant was very concerned of Master's condition. They use they use actually grass to gently touch his nostril. They could tell he still have they could feel his body temperature was still okay. It took another day to actually get a bit of life out of Master. So Master told his attendant that he actually was in his samadhi. He went to Tansha court to listen to Dharma talk. but his physical body was actually being tortured by the villains. His conscience actually went to the 10-shot heaven, to listen to Dharma talks. Several days after, the villain saw the monk was back to life, that he was actually, after all this torture they've done to him, they actually saw the master back to life again. The villains realized that this was actually not an ordinary person. So they started asking the rest of the monastic around, and how come this old guy would not die from all this torture. And they were told that master actually suffered for sentient beings. He went through all this suffering for all of you guys. So from the story of the descriptions, we can tell that Master Xu Yun was actually not upset or angry towards the villains who actually done physical harm to him. So the villains became very concerned of the story. They realized that master was not an ordinary person. And so they actually left at the end of the story. This is a story, this is a true story of how Chan masters truly cared for sentient beings and truly care for people. And even at the time of life in threat, at the time they would need to go through physical torture, their mind is still on their method. Their mind is still with the sentient beings. So this was an example of the torture he went through. Even though at the time of hardship, he would meditate, he went into samadhi for 9 continuous days. So the sufferings he went through, the stories we saw were actually, those hardships and samadhi experience were in tandem. So this actually very inspiring stories. Let me check my time. Due to the time constraint, I'm not able to go through all 10 hardships in the stories. Let me briefly mention all these time points of his life, when he was 43, when he was 45. And there were times where when he was actually, when he was 43, he went on pilgrimage to pay respect for his parents. He went on a pilgrimage for Wutai Mountain. There were actually a famous story where he has been helped by Manjushri Bodhisattva. And of course, from the age of 58 all the way to age 112, at the age of 68, he was giving Dharma talk in Thailand, and that's when he experienced the nice time of hardship. So there were 10 hardship stories related to Master Xu Yun. Now let's take a look of the stories around his passing. When I was reviewing materials in preparation for this talk, I came upon this part. In 1959, Master passed away. He knew that he wasn't at his best at the time. He was asked to share his final words. He mentioned that he has shared a lot of teaching with everyone. if there's anything you want me to share with you as my final words, I would actually say the following: practice precepts, meditation, and wisdom, or as known as prajna, diligently to extinguish desire, anger, and ignorance, and cultivate right mindfulness and right thought to nurture the great spirit of the fearlessness in order to help all people in the world. So the next day, on the 13th of October, he told his attendant that you've been my attendant for some years. We don't need to mention all the things I have gone through, but in the past 10 years, I've gone through all kinds of torments and hardship, leading a life full of danger and distrust. Attacked by slander and injustice, and I had no regret at all. When I was reading this quotation, that I had no regret at all, and I actually cried, because in our daily lives, we may experience some unhappy things, and we get upset. But if you look at Master Xu Yun, he went through all these unbelievable torture and hardships. All he wanted was actually to keep the monasteries and temples safe, and he wants to preserve these temples and the teaching of Buddha and great masters for the future generation. And I realized that our life is actually, we're so lucky to listen to Master Sheng Yan's teaching, and we're so lucky to still read those teachings passed down to us. And even for myself, I realize I still have a lot of vexations. I still need to work through all those internal feelings that I have. And this is a great encouragement and very inspiring for me.
So he was saying, this robe and bow, as I try my life to safeguard. So you'll have to continue to safeguard them. How? Just one word: precepts. So we have to safeguard them to continue the Dharma. So he focused on, he asked people to uphold precepts, and that's the way to continue the Dharma, keep the robe, the monastic robe, intact. This is a brief introduction of the life of Master Xu Yun. And next, we're going to talk about the teachings of Master Xu Yun. My most memorable retreat is the 49 days retreat with Master Sheng Yan. I remember that he had some teachings that really touched me and inspired me to practice diligently. When Shifu came to lead the retreat at the time. He said, you might be wondering why in my condition still come to teach. Because it's very important that I'm going to talk about Master Xu Yun's teaching in this retreat. When Shifu came into the Chan Hall, he had to be helped by his attendants to walk slowly into the Chan Hall. And he was sitting at the very end in the center aisle. And so he will ask people to turn around, and Shifu will walk to his seat. And he will come to teach 4 days out of the 7. Whenever he came, then we will be instructed to turn around to listen to his teaching. And one day, all of a sudden, I realized today is the day for his day to go to the doctor. How come he's here? And he said, because he did not go because he need to come here to talk to us. Instead of going to dialysis, he came to have a Dharma talk with us. I was so touched that he puts his dialysis, he postponed that in order to have the Dharma talk to us. This should show you how the Chan masters prioritize they do not focus on their bodily condition comfort. They focus on how to spread the Dharma to benefit the students, the retreatants. They desperately would like to teach people everything they know to help them to practice Chan. Next, we'll talk about the teachings of Chan by Master Xu Yun. When Shifu taught us about Huatou practice, he used his own life experience, how he practiced in the essentials of investigating Chan. There are a few important points. First is the prerequisites of Chan practice and understanding. And they'll talk about the purpose of Chan practice, the prerequisites, and then we'll focus on Huatou practice. So the prerequisites of Chan practice in the essentials of investigating Chan is clearly stated. That is to illuminating the mind and to see the self nature. It's to eradicate the impurities of the mind and to realize the original phase of the self nature. The impurities refer to the deluded thoughts and attachments, and the self nature is the same as the wisdom and the virtues of Tathagata. And to eradicate deluded thoughts is to lay everything to rest, and that is bodhi, which is wisdom, and to put everything to rest without giving rise to wandering thought. These are the way to eradicate deluded thoughts. And these are taught in the Platform Sutra. The key is to let go. Nowadays, we have so many wandering thoughts. For instance, when we are sitting, we're in sitting meditation, we will think of this or that, for the past or for the future. We will not be able to focus. And Master Xun said, you'll have to let go all of these. And during the pandemic time, all the retreats are run through online, and it will all depends how you design your own retreat. So to let go of everything without giving rise to wandering thoughts, people with sharp roots will be able to do that immediately. The second best will be able to apply the principles to eliminate the wandering thoughts and to realize the self nature. And we have to realize that our self nature is fundamentally pure, and the phenomena rise and perish. And it's very easy for us to follow and get influenced by the phenomena, by the thing we see, by the thing we hear, and give rise to like, dislike. We shouldn't follow that. We should let go all the phenomena and do not get influenced by them. And this is called to lay down everything. I just briefly talked about it. If you want to know more details, you're welcome to read The Essentials of Investigating Chan, or Master Sheng Yan's book, The Essentials of Chan Practice. And the method as discoursed in the Chan Hall, there are 4 essentials. First is to have immovable confidence and to uphold precepts. Master Xu Yun put the great emphasis on precepts. Some people might think that people practice Chan does not have to pay attention to precepts, but that's not true. If you don't pay attention, if you don't uphold precepts, then things will come to bother you. Upholding precepts will purify your mind, make your mind simple, and make it easier to practice Shan. And the third essential is to have affirmed confidence. And the fourth is to decide a method to practice. And guidelines for sitting meditation is we have to sit in a proper posture. You shouldn't be erect your back intentionally, neither should you slouch or lower your head. And there's also ways to handle barriers. And if you feel drowsy, then you open your eyes wide, you straighten your back and slightly move the buttocks. You feel, if you use everything and you still feel drowsy, then you can get up and do prostration to Buddhas. The first problem is drowsiness, and the second one is agitation or worry. When dealing with it, it's just simply lay them down and let them go. And you can also use repentance as a way to handle it. And there are many other situations, many other obstacles. In that case, in any of these cases, just let them go. Do not attach to them. Okay. Here we'll talk about the immovable confidence.
So how can we have immovable confidence? So what do we need to believe in? We need to believe that all sentient beings have Buddha nature and all sentient beings can reach Buddhahood. Because the Tathagata is actually within the nature of ourselves. It's because of the vexation and attachments that we cannot reach or attain enlightenment. This is a very important because we have to have this firm belief, this absolute confidence to begin with. So when we talk about we need to have this desperate attitude to be free from the life and death, and we need to have long-term commitment. We want to know where we come from before we were born. We want to know where we go after we die. This has to be, you need to be very desperate and in a very desperate state to find out. Otherwise, you're not able to commit it to the method. Otherwise, your practice will not be there for you. So a lot of times you probably be very diligent at one day, but you probably slack off and then you want to relax for another 10 days. And this, if you have a sporadic practice, it will make it very hard for this effort to continue. So therefore, the requirement is to have dedication, and then a dedication, and it's to the state that you're very desperate to be free from birth and death. And the other one is to have a long-term commitment. So if we look at the text in red, the truth is that we should be firm in our determination to solve the issue of birth and death. And we should stick to the Huatou, and no matter whether we are walking, standing, or sitting, or lying down, we should grasp it from morning to evening. And we should look into the word who as to question until it becomes clear. As clear as the autumn moon reflected in the lake. So the word who is actually the key point of our practice. And we mentioned how to use Huatou in previous talks. It's not that we have to continue as who all the time. We actually, so the analogy here is autumn moon reflected in the lake. It's so you need to be in a state of clarity. You need to be in a state of clear awareness, not when you are in the drowsy state. So this is what we talk about, the essentials. Next, let's focus on the methods. So in terms of the methods, what are the commonly used Huatou statement? For example, who is dragging this corpse around? What was your original face before your parents gave birth to you? The myriads of dharmas return to one. Where does one return to? And who is reciting the Buddha name, which is the most commonly used Huatou statement? So, so what is Huatou? Huatou is what before the thought arises. For example, you may be using who as the questions. So the reply to who will invariably be the same. It is mind. The word arises from mind, and the mind is the head of the word. So we want to focus on the mind. Like, for example, the mind, the word comes from the mind. Therefore, everything we see, all the phenomena we see, is actually comes from the mind. The mind is the head of everything, it's the head of the myriad things. So we focus on the mind. So Huatou is actually the mind that go way before everything happens. It may sound like a tongue twister. So you need to pick up Huatou. You want to go before what goes before that everything comes out or come to rise. So therefore, to make it in a simple words, before a thought arises, this is Huatou. So before that thought happens, before you're waiting for me to talk, where's your mind? In that split of seconds, in that split of mind, before I talk, what is before that, before you hear me talking? So that is to observe what your mind is, where your minds are. So to look into Huatou is to look into mind. The fundamental or original phase before a person is born is actually mind. To look into our original phase before we're born is to look into our own minds. So here is another explanation, but still about Huatou. So what is Huatou? So it is actually, so literally Huatou means the word head. So the word is the spoken word, and head or Hua the to, is what precedes the word. For instance, when one says Amitabha Buddha, this is a word. Before it is said, it is actually Huatou. That itself is called Huatou. It's the moment before a thought arises. As soon as a thought arises, it becomes a Huawei, becomes the end of the word. So the moment before a thought arises is called the unborn, the void which is neither disturbed nor dull, and neither still nor is called the unending. So the unremitting turning of the light inward on self, instant after instant, and exclusive of all other things, is called look into Huatou, or taking care of Huatou. And after Song Dynasty, the statement we use is actually who is reciting Buddha's name. A lot of times we just repeat the statement. You probably just repeat it back and forth. The most important is to have that down sensation of who is reciting. So the who itself is a question. If you make it a complete sentence, you make it a statement, you are just reading the lines. So the effort should be put into to investigate. That's why when you go into a Chan hall, you could actually see the statement of persistently practice Huatou. This is actually to reflect. You need to reflect it back to yourself, to look into yourself, to contemplate. Because our mind is constantly distracted by things being said, that things we hear. But now we need to turn our attention inwards to look at ourselves. It's just to turn the light around and put it on yourself inwardly. So this is how we define Huatou, because the definition already tells us is to observe our mind. Next, we need to look into doubt sensation. So what is doubt sensation? Okay, because when we look into Huatou, the most important thing is that to give rise to a doubt. Doubt is like the crutch of Huatou. For example, when we are asking who is reciting Buddha's name, we know that we are the people who is reciting this with our mouths, right? But what happened after we die? Like let's say we die, the mouth is still on the body. Can you recite it? No, it must be the mind that is reciting, is doing the recitation. So what is mind? If we are reciting with mind, then this is actually the beginning of looking into ourselves, turning attention to ourselves. We actually focus on who. This is where you actually have this subtle doubt sensation. And you want to make this questioning as subtle as possible. Keep it light with a slight effort or slight attention. You keep it flowing as the flow of water, to continuously to practice, to persistently to practice, to maintain this doubt sensation going. So when the doubt sensation is there, don't change it, don't move it. You don't need to do anything in particular with it. Just keep it there. If you find yourself deviating from that, you want to do it again to put it back. So for beginners, it is much easier for you to maintain this doubt sensation and when you're calm, when there's nothing distracting you, compared to in moving motion. But keep in mind that I don't get distracted. You don't need to worry about whether you are doing it right or not, whether you are in motion or you're sitting down. You need to stay focused single-mindedly. So in terms of who is reciting statement, if you're going to use this Huatou, the focus is on who. Especially the attention is on who, especially. It's a question, and you have to make it a question. So who is reciting the Buddha's name? So for instance, in the question style, you can also put the sentence differently. You can say, who is wearing this robe and eating rice? Okay, so who's putting an end to ignorance? So you can actually put who into any statement you have. But with the Shifu's teaching, his recommendation is to keep it on one form of the question. The focus is on who. So it doesn't matter if you are what you're doing, you're sitting down, going about your life. You want to focus on the who is doing the action. In Shifu's teaching, his recommendations to stay on the statement of who is reciting Buddha's name, because all these are just thoughts, because these are all the thoughts coming up and down. But if you try to change your statement, who is walking, who's eating, then actually becomes a distraction. You want to put your attention on the Tao sensation, actually, rather than on creating more sentences to distract yourself. So who of the Huatou is a wonderful technique in Chan training, and therefore but we shall not make use of who is reciting the Buddha's name as a way for chanting. So the Tao sensation is it's actually a way to check in with ourselves, to check in of our state of practice. So if you are not able to stay focused, if you're not able to maintain that Tao sensation, then you can probably just to change Amitabha's or Buddha's name. You may go into a state of mind where you're trying so hard to think or to search what is the Tao sensation, and then you may as well to reserve your energy for chanting. So let's take a closer look of Tao sensation. Usually beginners give rise to a Tao that's very coarse.
Whoever attended the Chan retreat before would probably know about this. When you were doing the Huatou, so according to Master Ji Cheng, it's like you're blowing a balloon, and if you blow it big, and sometimes it gets bigger, and sometimes it leaves the air, it gets smaller, and so that means that it's not considered Tao sensation. It can be at most be called thoughts. So gradually, when our deluded mind become less and less, and our mad mind become collected, and we can control our, our thoughts are kept under control, and that is possible to start investigating. And in Shifu's language, that when we gradually pick up the Huatou in a more familiar way, and we don't have to use much effort, the doubt will continue to arise without much effort, and in that condition, you probably will not sense, you don't know where you are, and you will forget about your body, your mind, and the world around you. And you only know about this doubt continuously without interruption. This is called doubt sensation. But in Shifu's definition, this is doubt mass. But in Master Xu Yun's definition, this is called the doubt sensation. So that's the time. Anyway, at that time, you just continue to pick up Huatou and continue to investigate. And now we talked about the possible strays. Sometimes the practitioner will encounter such a situation that you feel like you're calm and peaceful, but it's not clear. You've lost awareness. And it's usually we talked about the wisdom and the meditation have to be together, but you don't have that, the wisdom, and you're not clear. You don't have the right awareness at the time. A clear-minded teacher will see that, and they will give you an exam board. You might have become enlightened with that. And the second, the second possibility is you will encounter a situation where you feel very calm, and it's like it's empty, there's nothing, and you don't even have the doubt sensation. And this is dullness, and it's like a withered wood leaning on a rock cliff, or you're soaking a rock in cold water. You're not going anywhere. At this time, you'll have to pick up Huatou. Pick up is to be aware. If, for instance, you're using who's reciting the Buddha's name, but when you picked up at this time, it's a little different than how you started picking up the Huatou. At this time, you picked up in a finer way, in a more subtle way. Simply picked up, have a slight thought, very subtly but clearly, and a description of this situation is like how you should pick up like a continued smoke from a solitary fire, continuously coming out. And when you practice to this situation, then you don't have to continue to pick up. If you continue to pick up Huatou, then you are adding another head on the head. And so, yeah, there's still more to talk about. We don't have very much time. Next, we're going to talk about how Shifu talked about like when you practice different stages, you start from scattered mind to concentrated mind to unified mind to no mind. And in order, the corresponding method is to recite the Huatou, to question the Huatou, and to investigate a Huatou. And at the end is to continuously to pick up Huatou. So yeah, that in the stage of no mind is actual enlightenment. And I'm going over the principles. The most importantly is to reflect on one's self-nature. In Surangama Sutra, or you can read Shifu's book about how Avalokitesvara practiced. And the first most common situation, that's what we do, is to go with the stream. We go with what we hear, what we see, and the mind is influenced by all these phenomena. And we often get carried away by what we encounter. What is to go against the stream? It is to practice single-mindedly, not go after what we hear or see, or have any wandering thoughts. But rather, we will practice single-mindedly to reach a state that arising and perishing no longer exist. And this is called to go against the stream, is to use Huatou to reflect on one's self-nature. And to return to, now we talked about transform the consciousness to wisdom. Everybody has a mind that is the eighth consciousness, and the seventh consciousness is manas. And the seventh, the manas will cling on to the eighth consciousness. And this is a chart that will detail the relationship of them. And the seventh, the manas will trigger the sixth consciousness to lead the first five consciousnesses to seek outward through our sense faculties. And then the eighth consciousness will be trapped by all these, because we'll follow all the phenomena and we'll be really, really busy and trapped without seeing them clearly, without clear awareness. So it's very important to transform the consciousnesses to wisdom. And Huatou is like Vajra King's precious sword. We can, it's very helpful for us to transform the sixth consciousness to profound observing consciousness, and the seventh consciousness to the wisdom of equality, and usually we can observe ourselves. We have a lot of discrimination and discernment, and that's the functions, the continued function of our sixth and seventh consciousnesses. And through Huatou, we should be able to cut off these functions, especially the functions of our eyes and ears. At the time, even when you're seeing, you don't know what you're seeing. And when you're hearing, you don't know what you're hearing because your consciousness is not connecting to the phenomena. And it's the most importantly to transform the sixth and the seventh consciousnesses first, because they have the leading role. So sixth consciousness have the discrimination. And so if you can transform that, then it will become the profound observing wisdom. And the seventh can be transformed to the wisdom of equality. And these are transformed in the causality, in the causality sphere. And that will help us to and that's the ultimate goal of our practice, to transform consciousness to wisdom. And this is the basic principles of the method. Do not go with the flow, but rather go against the flow, to turn inwardly, to look at our self-nature. And we use Huatou to help us transform consciousnesses to wisdom. At the end, we'll have a little recap of Master Xu Yun and his life and his teaching.